Urrengo izlaria entzun aurretik, enpleguari buruzko laugarren
Let's now move on to our next talk. Remember, this fourth employment congress, there's a few practical things we need to say to you. As we already have a BAS strategy for employment 2030, the Deputy Minister said, look, it was time to get down to work. And we were going to talk about strategies, pathways, and of course, a compass is what we need. A compass, what we need, and in the short term, we've got our Basque employment plan for 2021-2024, and of course, the future law for Basque employment is going to help us in governance, effectiveness, and efficiency in the whole of the system. All of this is, with all these keys, we're going to be broaching all these matters via talks, around tables, and we'll be seeking consensus for inclusive employment in a global, competitive economy. Of course, there's the challenge also of socioeconomic recovery during this post-pandemic period. We'll also be talking about how we can move on to a demographic, technological, green transition, and we'll be talking, of course, about specific cases. We'll even talk about the draft law for the Basque employment system and then challenges of the future. You know that while you're here, there's another employment fair outside, Mercalan. In this employment fair, over 900 jobs are going to be available, both for the unemployed and those that want to change their working life. It was up and ready last Monday in a virtual format, and by the end of last week, 7,900 people had signed up to try to get this. Those that come here today will find all the information that you need to search for a job in Lanbide. You'll find job offers, vocational training schools are there, and universities as well. What's more, in internet, we've got webinars, talks, online talks. We've got experiences being told, and also entrepreneurship workshops, amongst other things. All of this is online, and also if you're interested, I ought to say to the link for the Mercalan online, if you want to go online, is www.mercalan.eus. I'm just filling time because we spoke earlier about the digital transition, and the next speaker is going to be using new technologies. These new technologies that we got used to in the pandemic. We got absolutely sick of online talks. We prefer physical presence, prefer to see each other face to face, but it's useful if we've got people that are so important as our next guest who can't be physically with us here today, but who we want to be able to welcome. So the first of these challenges, we were talking about consensus in employment for a competitive globalized economy, and now we have with us Mr. NICOLAS SCHMIT, who's Commissioner for Employment and Social Rights of the EU. He's got a great deal of experience because he was Minister for Labour for 9 years before joining the European Union. He's going to talk about the positive impact of improving the quality of employment in demography.
Good morning.
Buenos días, señor Smith. Le escuchamos.
So, good morning to everybody. So, dear Minister, there's a problem. There's an echo. Okay, fine. Uh, dear Minister Calvino, dear Nadia, dear President of the Economic and Social Council, dear Alfonso, dear participants, it's a great pleasure to participate to your Congress. I would have liked to be in Vitoria with you, but circumstances being what they are, it certainly is more difficult. The topic of inclusive and quality employment is surely very timely, given the recovery and transition period we are going through. Let me say first a few words on the recovery. Indeed, the good news is that our economies are indeed recovering, and more strongly than we expected them. According to the Commission summer forecast, 19 member states are expected to have reached pre-crisis GDP by the end of this year. Although in 2020 GDP fell significantly by 6.4% in the EU, in 21 and 22 GDP will grow again substantially. Also, in the Basque Country, considerable economic growth is expected, and GDP will grow by 6.7% in 21 and 6.4% in 22. At the EU level, unemployment rates are decreasing, while remaining somewhat above pre-crisis levels, reaching 6.7% in September 21. In the Basque Country, it stood at 10% compared to 9.2% in 2019. So the recovery is on a good track, but vigilance is of the essence. We are not yet out of the pandemic, and more people need to be vaccinated. We have different major uncertainties. Energy prices have soared dramatically. Shortage in different value chains are hampering the development of certain production. And there is, at least for the moment, a higher inflation looming. The European Pillar of Social Rights is a central part of the European recovery strategy. And as President von der Leyen recently highlighted, the need to pursue implementing the pillar, which will, I quote, ensure decent jobs, fairer working conditions, better health care, and better balance in people's lives. To demonstrate our ambitions, the Pillar Action Plan sets out new EU headline targets in employment, skills, and social protection for 2030. They will guide us in our endeavor to a more social Europe. One of them is indeed to have the rate of 78% average employment by 2030. In order to reach this objective, we need first and foremost to address the challenges of digitalization and the green transition. They can create jobs, increase the productivity, and lead to innovation, investment, and prosperity. But these benefits are not automatic, nor evenly distributed among regions and citizens. Expected employment impacts vary considerably between sectors, regions, and countries. We expect positive employment effects in green, industrial, and service sectors, such as renewable energy, construction, and waste management. We also expect the transition to have positive effects by favoring job creation for all skill groups, and notably for middle-skilled and low-skilled parts of the workforce. But we need to acknowledge that there will also be job losses. They will be concentrated in extractive sectors, notably coal, related downstream industries such as coal-based electricity generation. Currently, emission-intensive industries such as metals, cement, and car manufacturing will have to switch to clean production processes. And that includes also digital, scientific, and engineering skills. This particularly concerns the Basque Country. You have done remarkable work in modernizing some areas in your region. And I'm thinking, for example, of the vibrant and modern city of Bilbao, having invested a lot in culture. But your principal industry sector remains metallurgy and metal products, which will remain also in the future an important industry Europe needs. The fabricated metal products sector represents 27.4% of the gross value added. So it is essential to continue the path of transition and of modernization. The EU helps and will help. One example, 1.2 million was recently awarded from the European Globalization Adjustment Fund to provide support for 491 displaced workers in the Basque Country. The pandemic has had a significant impact on the activity and turnover of the enterprises operating in the metal sector, with negative consequences on employment and on the financial stability of enterprises. The Commission has launched the Just Transition Fund last year, and before the summer, we have proposed the Social Climate Fund. The Recovery and Resilience Facility can also be used to support these transitions. Aside the financial support, the Commission will also come forward with a proposal for a Council recommendation by the end of the year to provide guidance on the social and employment aspects of the climate transition. With the right policies in place, we estimate that EU-wide up to 1 million additional jobs could be created by 2030 and 2 million jobs by 2050. But more jobs, however, is not enough, and you are right to ask for quality jobs and inclusive labor markets. We are witnessing several labor shortages in many member states in specific sectors such as ICT, construction, and healthcare. Looking at the relationship between educational attainment and the employment status of the population, we see that job destruction led by the pandemic has affected all levels of education, but with a particular impact on people with lower educational attainment levels. The task ahead of us is quite big. Europe needs to and upskill over 100 million people in the next 5 years. That is why the European Social Pillar Action Plan and the Digital Compass have said the 80% of adults should have at least basic digital skills by 2030, up from 56% in 2019. And by 2025, 120 million people in the EU should participate in learning every year. The Basque Country is characterized by high polarization of the labor market. There are much more people with high and low level qualification and less in intermediate qualification levels. The focus on vulnerable, low-skilled groups is needed. Active labor market policies, including skilling and hiring incentives, as the Commission has proposed in its EASE program, which means effective active support to employment. We need Hiring incentives and skilling need to be at the center to smoothen out the negative sectoral and regional impacts of the transition. And also, I would stress the important role of public employment services. And here also I noticed that the Basque country, the Basque region, has decided to modernize in its public employment service. It is encouraging that nearly 3/5 of the European Social Fund budget is dedicated in the Basque country to sustainable and quality employment and labor mobility through access to employment and self-employment, entrepreneurship and business creation. The Basque country will receive an additional 93 million to finance training and hiring subsidies for the unemployed and the labor market integration of vulnerable people, as well as providing support to the social economy, which plays a very important role in your region. In this effort, we must not forget youth. When the crisis hit, the impact on young people's education, training, and job prospects became an immediate concern. We risk a new lost generation. EU response has been forceful and effective. Reinforced Youth Guarantee and Next Generation EU help member states act fast by devoting more funding to youth employment support measures, like hiring subsidies, but also support for apprenticeships, and focusing on more vulnerable young people. But we have to do more. In September 21, there were 2.8 million young persons unemployed in the EU, many more than the general unemployment of 6.7%, and the young represented 15.9%. I read that the NEET rate, those not in education or in employment or training, for the Basque country also increased by 1% to 8.2. Along with more investment in skills, it is also imperative to look at working conditions. We help people move to new future-proof jobs, but we also need to ensure the quality of these new types of jobs. Before and during the pandemic, inequalities have risen and work no longer pays. The share of low-paid and low-skilled occupations has increased, and low wages have not kept up with other wages. This has contributed to in-work poverty and wage inequality. In addition, the rises in food and energy prices has further exposed families with low incomes to poverty risks. 1 in 10 workers is at risk of poverty in the EU. And as Commission President said, work has to pay, and we have to re-establish the value of work. A directive on adequate minimum wages currently being negotiated helps remedy to the intolerable situation in which people work full-time and still cannot live decently from their wages. This will also help reduce the gender pay gap, since more women than men earn a minimum wage. I am very glad that in Spain the minimum wage increased to now 950 compared to 900 in 2019. Another key aspect of working conditions is the instability of employment due to temporary contracts. The segmentation of the labor market in Spain and in the Basque country persists. The share of temporary contracts in total employment remains high, above 22% in 2020. The Commission has in recent years issued country-specific recommendations to Spain to address the high level of segmentation in the labor market. We welcome Spain's willingness to address the situation and observe with great attention the intense national debate around the labor market reforms, which involves also social partners. We are also paying particular attention to the Spanish developments regarding platform work. Workers should not have to trade their rights for more flexibility. Platforms themselves have proven that they can create business models whereby workers enjoy some freedom with their working hours while benefiting from social protection and stable wages. We are looking into ways to improve the working conditions of these workers, and the legislative initiative is therefore under preparation to address platform work challenges in the EU. The lay rider is one that we have studied with great interest to inspire a European approach. My final remark on working conditions concerns telework. Over the past year, many workers have been experiencing difficulties related to health and safety, work-life balance, and working time. The crisis forced many to switch to telework and accelerated the already ongoing effects of digitalization. Almost 40% of those working in the EU began to telework full-time, compared to 5.4% in 2019. We estimate that between 33 and 40% of jobs in the EU are teleworkable. All of this has brought a higher burden, especially on women. Evidence shows that mothers have to deal with interruptions by children more often than fathers when teleworking. This lowers their productivity and could reduce their career progression and pay. We are facilitating debates with member states, social partners, and other stakeholders to agree on some principles, like the right to disconnect, making sure no one is expected to be reachable 24 hours, 7 days a week, because he or she is working from home. My final point relates to demographic challenges. The pandemic has shown how crucial access to long-term care and healthcare is for people's well-being and for the functioning of our society. Europe's population is getting older. By 2070, 30% of people in Europe are estimated to be aged 65 and above, up from about 20% today. The population of the Basque Country is slightly increasing in the last years, but with one of the highest rates of elderly people in Spain, 25.5% in Spain are over 65 already now. Here again, women are particularly affected, shouldering most of care responsibilities, either as informal carers and therefore unpaid, or as care workers, often facing very precarious and difficult working conditions. Addressing the demographic challenge will therefore require reinforcing and modernizing social protection systems to ensure, first, adequate pensions, second, quality and accessible health and long-term care, and finally, other essential social services. Once again, the Commission is observing with interest the ongoing national debate on pensions in Spain. At European level, we will propose next year a new European care strategy to support men and women in finding the best care and the best life balance for them, and especially also tackling working conditions in the care sector. Allow me now to conclude by welcoming the Basque Country's good performance and alignment to the objectives of the European Pillar of Social Rights. Let me also underline the good cooperation with Basque authorities on the European Social Fund. We have achieved very positive results so far. More than 18,800 unemployed have benefited from training and apprenticeship programs. And in terms of social inclusion, more than 2,400 people with disabilities have been assisted. We expect the new European Social Fund Plus to help address the new challenges, also those that arise with the COVID pandemic, notably the increased youth unemployment and the need to reinforce the Basque country's competitiveness by developing new employment opportunities and improving skills. The Recovery and Resilience Plan for Spain foresees important reforms and investments to address the challenges in the labour market. The Commission encourages you to contribute in this endeavour, for example, with investments to boost digital skills, more businesses, research cooperation, and training and professional development of recent PhD graduates. We also count on your support to mobilize all stakeholders, including employers, since it will be one of the key factors for the successful implementation of the Recovery and Resilience Plan. Social dialogue, promoting social dialogue, as it happens in Spain, is a key approach for a successful investment in the green or transition in the green and digital economy. Now, I wish you a fruitful discussion and exchanges during this Congress, and I thank you for your attention.
Muchas gracias, comisario.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith, for your words. We have 6 minutes before the coffee break. So I would like to ask you a question after listening to your words. I believe there's someone that will be interpreting for you. First of all, I have a question regarding the European response to the crisis of the COVID-19. It's been very different to the response after the financial crisis in 2008. Your response has been able to maintain many jobs. What has changed so that things have been done differently? Is there a new financial narrative that has brought the Commission to foster new responses when confronting financial and social crisis?
Certainly, we all have been surprised by, first by the pandemic, and second by the crisis, which has followed the beginning of this pandemic. And I think, as you have said, this has necessitated a certain number of changes in our policies. Also, when I compare this crisis to the previous crisis, which is not so far away because it happened sometime around 2010. First, I would like very much to insist on the efforts which have been developed to help people to keep their jobs, to help companies to survive. And here, I think the first program we launched was the SURE program, 100 billion euros, which helped to save millions of jobs, to support mainly smaller and medium-sized companies, not to close their doors, to keep their employees, and especially also to save the income of millions of people, which also had then a positive impact on the overall economic situation. So I think this was quite a change and helped, at least in the first period, to better resist to the disastrous impact of the pandemic on the economic situation. Especially in Spain, where more than 20 billions were available for short-time work, this helped a lot the Spanish economy, including the Basque economy. Now we are in the recovery, as I already explained, and we have to use this recovery first to reform and modernize our economies. That's about the green and digital transition. But also to rebuild a strong social basis in our economy, which means clearly, first, investing a lot in education, investing a lot in re- and upskilling, but also investing a lot in our social infrastructures. Because we have seen that a strong health system has been key in this crisis, because finally health systems have determined our resilience in relation to the pandemic and the crisis. And this shows indeed that it's not just going back to what was before the crisis. We have to rebuild our economies, and certainly the climate challenge is fundamental in this context, and I can only underline the huge efforts which are made in Spain in relation to the greening of the economy, but also technological progress, which on one hand helps us to modernize our economy, creates also new challenges in the world of work. I've mentioned telework, which has been a strong support there also to maintain a lot of activities, but has also social consequences. And therefore we have to approach both sides, the opportunities, helping to develop these technological changes, and on the other hand also mitigating the consequences of these changes. So I think the crisis, we have to draw a lot of lessons out of this crisis, precisely to rebuild our economies and make them socially fairer and socially more resilient.
Pues, hablando de justicia,
Whilst on the subject of justice, which is what you've just finished on, there are several countries in the OECD that since the 1980s have seen this mismatch between salary growth and an increase in productivity. This has led to a drop in the amount salaries account for in the GDP. This is also means a drop in the purchasing power of workers, and that also is due to a precarious nature of employment amongst the working force. How can we change that?
More or less understood. Well, I think here also there is a paradigm shift in the approach defended by the Commission. We all remember what happened during the financial and economic crisis, where wages, and especially also minimum wages, were, at least in some countries, reduced. Now, even before the pandemic, but also during this crisis, we have very firmly sticked to better wages and especially better increasing low wages. That's the sense of our proposal on a framework for adequate minimum wages. You have mentioned the gap between productivity on one hand and wages on the other. You have also mentioned the part of wages in GDP, which has decreased in most of the countries in comparison to other forms of revenues. I think here we need, again, a better balance. But there is also a very strong linkage between better wages and better productivity. I think the biggest challenge, due to, especially also to the digitalization of our economies, is to invest more in qualified labor, in people's skills. Low wages are certainly not the solution for competitiveness. What is the solution is better skills, which lead to higher productivity and should lead also to better wages. By the way, also better wages have an impact on our internal demand, which has been a bit neglected during the last years. So I think this is what the Commission is now pleading in favor, and which is very clearly underlined by our proposal on a framework for adequate minimum wages.
Bueno, 11:18 de la
It's
mañana.
11:18.
Comisario Schmidt, no le robamos más tiempo.
Commissioner Schmidt, we won't take any more of your time. We'll take note of what you said because it's similar to what our Deputy Minister and Deputy Prime Minister spoken about this morning.
Morning. Have a nice day.